All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Pump Fake. Jarrett Bailey, joined by the always wonderful Anita Marks. You can catch her on Daily Wager, among other ESPN family of programs. Anita, it's so good to see you. How are you?
I'm great. It's interesting. So, your viewers have to know, like, we met because you posted this, in my opinion, insane win total for the Eagles. And then I came after you on social media. And then
You really
now,
did.
here we are 48 hours later and we're having a discussion about it. That's the beautiful thing about social media, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I posted, all the division predictions after going game by game and whatnot. I had Philadelphia at 6 wins, and then not 24 hours later, they add James Bradbury, and then the first thing I see after that is Anita Marks just dunking on me on Twitter. So yes, look, I have my worries about Philadelphia, but present your case to me about the Philadelphia Eagles.
Well, first things first. Like, are you I'm not a fan of anything. I grew up a Steelers fan. At that point in time, you were either Steelers or Cowboys, one or the other. I grew up in Miami. I grew up going to the Dan Marino games at the Orange Bowl before he started playing at Joe Robbie Stadium. I know I'm dating myself here. And then I spent 4 years in Baltimore, so my heart does bleed a little purple. And then I worked for the New York Football Giants for 6 to 7 years in their broadcast team, so my heart does bleed a little blue. But because I'm so entrenched in sports gambling and fantasy football, I have to leave my heart at the door. And I have to be honest, not only with myself if I want to win money, but also to try to help other people win money. So I'm just curious, like, are you a fan of a certain team, or do you not have any allegiance to anything? Like, where do you stand?
We actually talked about this on Trivia Bowl a couple of nights ago. How, like, journalists, reporters, and whatnot, like, kind of lose their fandom over time. I haven't lost mine yet. I mean, I've grown up a Steelers fan. I've always been one.
Oh, okay.
So it's still there. It hasn't left me. I hope it doesn't. So yeah, that's where my fandom lies. I don't really have a bias against Philadelphia or anything like that. But yeah, no, my fandom is still very much intact.
Listen, I think people are sleeping on the Pittsburgh Steelers, by the way. I think people are sleeping on Trubisky. I think he's going to be an excellent starting quarterback. I think it's going to be a minute before we see Pickett. I think their defense is going to be top notch. And I've already put money down that the Steelers make it to the postseason as a wild card. I think the Ravens win the division. But I know you have me on talking about the Eagles. A few things. Number one, just full transparency. I'm not sold on Jalen Hurts, by the way. In fact, I've gone on the record to say that the Eagles should have explored possibly trading him this offseason and rolling with Gardner Minshew as the bridge quarterback to go get their stud quarterback next year, when, of course, the quarterback class is going to be extraordinary. At least reports are as such. But listen, I get it. They like the element, obviously, that Jalen Hurts can bring to that offense. We'll see what can happen. I just like what they're surrounding him with. To bring in A.J. Brown, wide receiver from Tennessee, we know what he can do, along with Devontae Smith, who is going to be entering into his second year, so there's going to be a lot of growth there. Dallas Goedert, you can argue top 10 tight end. I think you can even argue top 7 tight end in the NFL. They've got a lot of depth at the wide receiver position. They've got a plethora of depth at the running back position, and a variety of running backs who have a variety of different skill sets that they can accentuate. They've got a top 10, you can argue top 7 defensive line. I'm looking at their depth chart right now. But I've buried the lead here, and that's defensively. I had a lot of scouts tell me that Jordan Davis was their favorite player coming out of the draft. I know there's some concerns that he's not a 3-down lineman. He's overweight. He's not in good shape. But there was a few scouts who told me, man, he's going to change. Centers are going to be terrified to go up against him. Now, you're going to put him next to Fletcher Cox and that line with Hargrave and Brandon Graham. They arguably could have the best defensive line in the NFL this coming season. And now Bradbury has to get cut from the Giants because Dave Gettleman screwed up their salary cap so bad that now he signs with the Eagles. Yeah, they've got Darius Slay and Bradbury as their shutdown corners. A lot of depth in that secondary. They drafted well in adding some talent to their linebacking core. Here's the thing with the Eagles. They're stacked. they check all the boxes in every level. Secondary, linebacker, defensive line, running back, offensive line, tight end, wide receiver. Again, I know it sounds crazy, and because it's the most important position, that's the quarterback position. I'm not saying that I don't like Jalen Hurts. Jury's still out for me when it comes to Jalen Hurts. But all the pieces that they have surrounded him with and all that they've been able to do in free agency and in the draft, they crushed it. I think the Eagles win this division this year.
All right, so let me get this rebuttal in, I guess, because you make excellent points. The thing with Philadelphia, obviously a playoff team last year. That said, they didn't beat anybody good. And they had multiple chances to. They got thwarted both times by Dallas. I know that the regular season game against Tampa Bay was only decided by a possession, but that game was not as close as the score would let it on to be. If it weren't for 2 pass interference calls getting them into the red zone, I think that game is much more closer to being a blowout than it is than the actual score turned out to be. They lost to Los Angeles. They lost to Kansas City. Like, any time that they had a chance to beat a good team, they just didn't. And then in the postseason, in the wild card round, Jalen Hurts went 13 for $1 million against Tampa Bay. So, look, it's great that they added A.J. Brown. But what's his best ability is being a deep threat. Do I trust Jalen Hurts to be able to consistently hit him on deep balls? I do not. And Devontae Smith had a very nice, he's coming into his own as well. I think it just comes back to the fact that I know that you're not sold on Jalen Hurts. I think I'm even less sold on Jalen Hurts than you are. 28th in completion percentage, 22nd in passer rating. They have built a fantastic roster around him. There's no question about that. I'm also worried about how they're going to utilize Miles Sanders. I feel like they haven't used him to the best of their ability. I know they have a plethora of backs, and they use Gainwell, they use Boston Scott, they have a lot of guys back there, but I think Miles Sanders is another guy that they need to try to incorporate more into their offense. So they were a playoff team last year. That's great. I'm more sold on the Washington Commanders coming into this year. They were a 7-win team last year with Taylor Heineke at quarterback. They get an upgrade at Carson Wentz. They'll have Curtis Samuel in their lineup, who they signed last year from Carolina, who only played really in one game. They added Jahan Dotson. Their front four, by the way, pretty darn good too. They'll have Chase Young coming back, Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, all of them former first-round picks. Kendall Fuller and William Jackson in the second. I like Washington a lot more than I like Philadelphia.
So my only concern in regard to Washington is Carson Wentz, and I'm pulling up the depth chart here as well for them. Listen, I loved Carson Wentz when he was in Philadelphia. There have been years where I have placed money down that I thought Carson Wentz would win the MVP, but something went foul there. Okay. Then he leaves Philadelphia, couldn't get out of there fast enough, goes to the Indianapolis Colts, has an unbelievable opportunity with the Indianapolis Colts. Great organization, good ownership group, great staff, great coaching staff, a lot of weapons around him. And they couldn't wait to get rid of him. They couldn't wait. I mean, even ownership in his press conference with the media just threw him under the bus. Now, I love Ron Rivera. I think Ron Rivera is one of the best coaches in the NFL. If anybody can straighten out whatever's wrong with Carson Wentz, I believe it's Ron. But, Washington has had a history as well. There's a lot of drama over there. So, listen, I love Antonio Gibson. Was a top-notch pick for me this past year in fantasy football. Terry McLaurin, you add and talent-wise, you're right. Carson Wentz improvement at the quarterback position. I think Terry McLaurin can have a big day. We really didn't see a lot from Curtis Samuel last year because of his injury. I think he's an absolute stud. Loves him when he was in Carolina. Defense is fantastic. For me, the biggest question mark is Carson Wentz. What is wrong with Carson Wentz that he can't make it in Philadelphia or Indianapolis, and so he's going to have to prove that he can make it in Washington? So for me, that's my hesitation there.
Before I let you go, I'm also very bullish on the New York Giants, which I will acknowledge I might be a year early on the New York Giants. I know. Look, I like Brian Dable a lot. I think they've had a fantastic offseason in terms of what they've brought into that building and bringing Dable, hiring Wink Martindale to an already really solid defense. They were very injury-bitten last year. Mike Glennon was the quarterback for the majority of last year. I know Daniel Jones is nothing special, but I don't think that he is god-awful either. I might be, like I said, I might be a year early on the New York Giants, but if they stay healthy, I like them at minimum to be a tough out every week.
I think you are a year early. There's a lot going on here. First and foremost, you mentioned Daniel Jones. people here in New York want him gone. I don't get it. Like, he's uber intelligent. Dude ran 22 miles an hour. Granted, he tripped over his own 2 feet, but how many human beings can run 22 miles an hour?
Every white kid quote tweeted that and was like, "Look at that! That was fantastic."
I mean, it's unbelievable. I think, and I'm with you. I love Brian Dable in Joe Shane. I think that 1-2 punch, them coming here to New York, I think is fantastic. Dable spoke to the media yesterday, as well as Kafka. They said this isn't a Bills offense. This isn't a Kansas City offense. This is going to be the Giants offense, and it's going to incorporate a little bit of both. And I think it's really going to accentuate what Daniel Jones has to offer. So I'm more excited for the season to see what Daniel Jones can create and can turn into under Dable and Kafka more than anything else. But this is still a young, maturing offensive line. Wide receiver, there's some big question marks with Kadarius Toney as well as Galladay. Then on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, listen, the Giants crushed it in the draft, right? Getting Neal, getting Thibodeau, great. Improves both offense and defensive lines, but they lose Bradbury. You got Wink Markindale here as their defensive coordinator. He likes to be uber aggressive. It's hard to be uber aggressive, get after that quarterback when you don't have shutdown corners. And now you just cut Bradbury. So I think their defense is going to take a step back. Everybody's going to have to learn this new system. I think this is going to be a growing year for the Giants. I know their over under total of wins is 7. To me, it's right there. I think the Giants will be lucky if they win 8 games.
Sure. All right, 30 seconds before we go. Dallas Cowboys, I think I might be a little bit lower on this one. I think I had them at 8 wins to start off. Dak Prescott's fantastic. Offensively, I think I got a little bit weaker on the outside and trading away Amari Cooper and whatnot. CeeDee Lamb's still there. They bring over James Washington from Pittsburgh. Defensively, I know Trayvon Diggs intercepted 1 million passes, but they also got beat over the top a lot last year as well in that secondary. What are your thoughts on Dallas?
Yeah, listen, you take away Amari Cooper, I think that's a big loss. CeeDee Lamb, he dropped a lot of balls last year. So now you got to make CeeDee Lamb your number one. Also, they've got a lot of injuries returning on that wide receiving core, which is some big concerns. And on the defensive side of the ball, you lose Randy Gregory. Now he's in Denver to play alongside Bradley Chubb. I think their defense takes a step back as well. At the end of the day, I think it's really going to come down to Dallas and the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Philadelphia Eagles win the division for a number of reasons. Don't forget, this entire division, by the way, we neglected to mention this, has the easiest schedule. The NFC East has the easiest schedule as a division of any division in the NFL. So these teams are going to win some easy games, with all due respect to the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Texans. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the Cowboys and the Eagles. I think the Eagles win the division, and I think the Cowboys might be there like that last game of the season where they have to win to try to get in as a wild card and see how the NFC plays out. And then I think that the cellar dwellers will be Washington and the Giants. That's how I see this playing out.
Anita Marks, fantastic as always. Thank you very much, Anita. We'll revisit this very soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks, Anita. All right, so look, Anita's right. When it comes down to the NFC East, I mean, they're going to play a lot of tough competition by Anita. They're going to play the easiest schedule, not tough competition, rather lack thereof. They're going to play the easiest schedule, so that will have to factor into these things. And look, you look at Philadelphia. I had them at 6-11, and I already touched a little bit on why. I just don't believe in the fact that Jalen Hurts can come out and improve so drastically on what he's shown us so far, which is he's not accurate, he's not consistent, can make plays with his feet, that's great, but he's kind of the diet Pepsi Lamar Jackson, you know? And look, I'm not big on Lamar Jackson either when it comes to throwing the ball. So factor all that into it, yeah, I'm going to be low on Jalen Hurts. Defensively, though, they are solid. Now, 2 years ago for Philadelphia, linebacker was their biggest position of need. Like, they were burnt a lot over the middle, but their defense has gotten a lot better. And now having Darius Slay on the outside, along with Bradbury, they're good at every level. So what they've built around, I think that Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, both Pennsylvania teams, are in very similar boats, where we don't necessarily know what we're going to get at the quarterback position, but everything else around them is fantastic. Pittsburgh's got a great running back in Najee Harris, good tight end in Pat Freiermuth, good receivers, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool just added 2 in George Pickens and Calvin Austin, who they expect to be contributors right away. And then defensively, I mean, they've got the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, T.J. Watt. Cam Hayward continues to be an All-Pro. Minka Fitzpatrick is fantastic, one of the best safeties in the game. So I think that both Pennsylvania teams are in very similar boats right now, where, hey, they're building a hell of a roster around their quarterback. But what's his quarterback going to be? And look, Philadelphia, like at one point I was pounding the table that Gardner Minshew should be the starter there. And I'm not necessarily sure I'm wrong on that right now. Like, Gardner Minshew, he's better than some starters in the league right now. I'd take him over Jameis Winston. I'd take him over anything Pittsburgh has right now. I would take him over a decent amount of guys. I'd take him over Tua Tagovailoa. Now, I mean, if you're Indianapolis, I mean, I would probably take him over Matt Ryan at this stage of Matt Ryan's career. Obviously Matt Ryan's, more intelligent football-wise. He's been around longer, so I understand why they would go that route. But I think that Jalen Hurts is going to be what holds Philadelphia back. Definitely not what drives them forward. That's similar for Pittsburgh. Yeah, like I said, both Pennsylvania teams are in a very similar boat. I continue to be bullish on the Washington Commanders, though. Granted, there are reasonable questions around Carson Wentz. His third team in 3 years. That says something about what the ownership, the Irsay family, Chris Greer and everybody, and that front office in Indianapolis thought of him. And look, everybody will point out, as they always do, Week 18 against Jacksonville. And I get that. He played poorly. He should have played better. They should have won. They should have been a playoff team. They were not. And he did not. That said, Josh Allen played just as bad, if not worse, against those same Jacksonville Jaguars. Justin Herbert played very bad against the Houston Texans. Joe Burrow played poorly against the Jets and their 13th quarterback. So it's hard to turn that into a microcosm and put that under a microscope. They play the games for a reason. Anything can happen any given Sunday. And we saw that. We see that every year. There's going to be games that teams should win that they don't. There's going to be games that they shouldn't win that they do. In Jacksonville's case, beating Buffalo, beating the Indianapolis Colts. In the Jets' case, beating Tennessee, who ended up being the AFC's #1 seed. Beating Cincinnati, who ended up winning the Super Bowl. Going to the Super Bowl, winning the AFC. And they play the games for a reason. Anything can happen. And it just so happened that Indianapolis had a very off day when they really couldn't afford one. But look, Wentz, nobody talks about it because Lamar Jackson had a very good game and led a big comeback on Monday Night Football. Carson Wentz probably had the best game of his career that day. Threw for over 400 yards, had Indianapolis leading big. He isn't the one that spoiled that. That's the defense's fault. And look, nobody's going to talk about it because, Lamar Jackson had an incredible day too, leading the comeback. But Carson Wentz had a fantastic day. Fantastic night. And arguably the best game of his career. So, I'm bullish on the Washington Commanders, more so than the New York Giants, especially after losing Bradbury. We kind of knew it was coming. I thought that they would at least get a trade in return, but when you're in cap hell that Dave Gettleman put you in, they were left with little options. So, the New York Giants, and again, as I said, I might be a year early on the New York Giants. And look, I'm going to do a second version of the game-by-game picks right before the season starts. I do one now, and then wait the rest of the offseason, and then right before Week 1 kicks off, I do my final one. You can bet that the NFC East will see some adjustment. The Eagles getting a couple more wins, maybe the Giants getting a couple less wins. But I would like to see the New York Giants do well, especially because they've been shoved down our throats in prime time for the past God knows how long. Like, if they're going to do that, at least be good. That's all we can hope for. But I continue to be bullish on the Washington Commanders. It seems that teams, maybe not teams, it feels like a lot of people are just letting them fly under the radar, which I'm sure that they're okay with. And I might come back to the Carson Wentz thing. But defensively, like Chase Young coming back off the torn ACL, they started off slow last year on the defensive side of the ball, which surprised a lot of people based off what they did in 2020. Their defense was the catalyst to why they won the NFC East that year. Chase Young back. Still got Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne. Cole Holcomb has shown promise at the linebacker position. So there's definitely some good talent on that side of the ball. Kendall Fuller is quietly one of the best cornerbacks in football. They added William Jackson to the other side of him last year. So I think that safety position is what they really have to get stronger at. Like Landon Collins just hasn't been. He's not what you want a starting safety anymore. I think he's more of like a nickel backer than an every down safety anymore. But there's very few weaknesses on the Washington Commanders defense. And in terms of Dallas, I mean, like I pointed out with Anita, Dak Prescott's fantastic, coming off a year in which he threw 37 touchdowns to only 10 interceptions. He really carried them, and it's a shame that it takes somebody either leaving or getting injured or just not being around for you to realize what value they have for a team. Dak Prescott's the best example of that. Because for so long, people said, this offense runs through Ezekiel Elliott. And Dak Prescott's more of a passenger than a driver for this team's success. Anytime there was success, Dak didn't necessarily get the credit for it. But anytime that there was lack of success, he was the one who was blamed for it. And then he gets injured, out for the majority of the season in 2020. Comes back in 2021 and shows everybody that he is very much in the conversation for, one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. And this offense is going to have to run through him because Ezekiel Elliott has regressed so much in the past couple of years. A lot of people saying that he's not even the best running back on the roster anymore. A lot of people want to see more of Tony Pollard. Not having Amari Cooper there, but they still have CeeDee Lamb. They added James Washington, somebody who's been criminally underused and underrated since he came to the league out of Oklahoma State. The Steelers just, for some reason, decided that Ray McCloud was worth more snaps and being the wide receiver 3 than James Washington was. I don't know why. So I think that James Washington's going to have a little bit of a career resurgence in Dallas. And then defensively, look, they lose Randy Gregory. Their linebackers aren't very good. Like Leighton Vander Esch hasn't been anything special. They all-out released Jalen Smith. And then Trayvon Diggs, again, as great as it was to see him intercept everything that was thrown his way, if he got his hands on it, he also let up a ton of yards. Was beat a lot. It was very much boom or bust for Dallas's defense last year. That's not going to repeat itself. It's similar to how Miami played in Tua's rookie year in 2020. Because the Dolphins rode their defense. They had the most takeaways in the league. I think they had the most defensive touchdowns in the league that year. You're not going to do that year in and year out. And they needed to see the growth in Tua. They didn't see it. Granted, he got injured and whatnot. So I think that Dallas is going to see something similar to that. Where, okay, you intercepted 1 billion passes last year, led the NFL in interceptions. What happens when you don't do that? Because they're not going to have 34 or 35 interceptions again like they did last year. It's just not going to happen. The odds of them being able to do that in back-to-back years is very slim. So, are they going to be able to limit teams from running up and down the field on them? Because as good as Dak Prescott is, you can't win games 51-50 every week. You can't win games, 41-38 every week. You can't expect your offense to put up 38 points a game. Now, there's got to be some give and take here. That's my concern with the Dallas Cowboys. We know that Dak and the offense are going to be able to put up points. But there's going to be weeks where, okay, they're going to score 23, 24 points. Can the defense hold the other team below 25? Michael Parsons is fantastic. He can't, he's not going to be playing deep coverage. You can do a lot of different things with him in the front seven. You can put him up the middle. You can have him come off the edge. You can have him play in shallow coverage. But he is only one man, and he can only do so much. They need to get him help. And I think that we've overrated Trayvon Diggs a lot purely off of his stats. And, we're going to see a little bit of a regression from the Dallas defense. So I'm still very bullish on the Commanders winning the division. I think they'll be a 10-win team. especially because, they have a very easy schedule. And then, it looks like Philadelphia could play their way into second place in that division. I like them overall better than I like Dallas. And look, I'm still hopeful for the New York Giants. But I think that we're going to see a building block year with good progress for the first time in a long time for the Giants, by the way. Nothing seemed to come in the Ben McAdoo era. Nothing really came in the Pat Shurmur era. Nothing came in the Joe Judge era. All of which lasted less than 2 seasons apiece, I believe. So I think we're going to see actual progression with the Giants this year. But I am going to take a little bit of a step back after losing their top cornerback to a division rival. Now look, that isn't to the fault of anybody in that building right now. That is completely to the fault of Dave Gettleman and him putting that team in absolute cap hell. There's nothing that you can really do about it at that point. If you're the new regime there, you just got to kind of eat it and move on and try your best to recover from it. So we'll see. We will see. Still very bullish on the Washington Commanders and what they bring to the table. But yes, that is kind of how I feel about the NFC East right now. If I had to rank them, and look, like I said, I'm going to do game-by-game predictions right before Week 1 starts again, but if I had to guess right now, it's going to be Washington, Philadelphia, Dallas, New York. And look, I know that I've been very bullish on the New York Giants, but after everything, it's not to say I think they're going to be terrible. I think they'll be right around a 7-win team, which is what their over-under is set at. So I would push in terms of betting on them to win over or under. I think they're going to be right around 7. I think Dallas is going to be in that 8-9 win range. Philadelphia probably the same. And then Washington with 10 wins. So I don't think much is going to change with Washington. Perhaps I think that they were going to split with Philadelphia either way. But nothing much changing in terms of my feelings about Washington. New York, that's kind of a different story. That's why we have an offseason though. For all this stuff to happen and watch teams build off of what they were last year and try to improve. And again, it's not to the fault of the Giants that they couldn't afford to keep James Bradberry. It's to the fault of the guys who used to be there. It's the fault of Dave Gettleman. But so I think that the NFC East, obviously a little bit of a power shift in the past couple of days with James Bradberry going from New York to Philadelphia. So we'll see how it all shapes out. You can follow me on Twitter at JBaileyNFL. You can check out all my written work on USA Today, Sports Illustrated, and Fansided. Latest piece on USA Today breaking down each quarter of the Chicago Bears schedule. New piece coming out for Sports Illustrated probably tomorrow on why the Matt Corral project in Carolina could work, as well as stuff for San Francisco. Game-by-game predictions for the 49ers. Go check that out on Sports Illustrated. Bills game-by-game predictions. Go check that out on Sports Illustrated. All of that is in the bio in my Twitter on my link tree as well, so you can check all of that out at JBaileyNFL on Twitter. Thank you to Anita March for joining me for a little bit today. Always fun talking to her. We'll do this again soon. Everybody, thank you so much for joining me on the Pump Fake. Again, follow me on Twitter at JBaileyNFL for all the written work and all the updates on when new shows will be, new guests, all of that fun stuff. See you next time on the Pump Fake.